of 1616. And I am flipping the schedule a little bit today. We're going to start with the opponents and finish with the proponents. A couple of reasons, but let's go ahead and get started. We do lose several committee members at 10 a.m. So hopefully they'll go back and watch the video and if there's any questions, new data. Welcome to the committee. First up is John Donnelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. It's obvious that my efforts to not go alphabetical order with the assistant did not work. So anyways, appreciate the opportunity to be here. I am here today on behalf of Kansas Farm Bureau, the 30,000 members of Kansas Farm Bureau. I want to talk some of the policy issue, but I want to also talk about some of the process that we went through in the last year to solidify, I guess, our position on this resolution. Number one, first, I truly want to thank the proponents of this measure. I think everyone wants the same thing. We all recognize that property taxes are unpopular. Trust me, I think they're more unpopular than most people. They're the least favorite tax, and I think your constituents are saying we want property tax relief. Our position on this bill is that this is actually a property tax shift. We've walked through that last year. I can answer any questions to that effect today. I'm not going to delve into the details. In my opinion, or in the opinion of Kansas Farm Bureau, what this does is if you cap certain properties at 3%, the properties that are not growing at a rate above 3% are then more subject to what will likely be a mill levy increase by local units of government. So more of that burden will be shifted onto the valuation of that versus the artificial cap in the constitutional amendment. Another important point, and I hadn't even really thought of this, that was raised to me the other day, is part of the reason this has to be a constitutional amendment is because in our beliefs this is not applied uniform and equally, which is what we're required to do. So that is part of the reason that we're opposed to this. I know there will be a conferee after me that will have a lot of details on the numbers. I know there were numbers that showed agriculture yesterday and likely will be after this. I will say those analysis that the proponents are showing on agricultural land, two things. Number one, I think it's very difficult to analyze this issue with statewide generic, that's not the right term, but generic numbers. You actually have to look at this on a county to county, taxing subdivision to taxing subdivision basis. And I know KLA will have some numbers to that effect. I guess the following point, and this comes after some of the questioning yesterday, is I do think this could add some transparency. Anytime that you require local units of government, or state government for that matter, to be truthful in their taxation and have a vote as to whether they want to increase their budget, I think that's beneficial. That's why we supported the revenue neutral rate. That's also why we supported the property tax lid that was repealed when we put in the revenue neutral rate. So I don't want people to come up here and think that Kansas Farm Bureau is all for skyrocketing property taxes. That is not the case. And if you've heard me testify over the last 20-some years, I think you would know that. All that said, I also want to thank the proponents because they actually made a fairly concerted effort to change Kansas Farm Bureau policy in the last year through our policy development process. I indicated we have over 30,000 voting members. We also have a process that's tried and true for grassroots policy development, and we have issues surfacing in the spring, then goes to resolution committee, back to a listening post. And this amendment was offered to change our policy. It did not make it out of the resolutions committee. However, there was an effort and there were discussions about providing this resolution on the delegate floor with our 400 voting delegates. So just want to let everybody know that our members did consider this through our tried and true process of deliberation, and we did not change our policy. I guess I'll just close with this and stand for any questions, but I want to be abundantly clear that Kansas Farm Bureau truly does speak and has over 100-year history of being the voice of Kansas agriculture. And I have a lot of faith in the grassroots policy development process. I will tell you that as their lobbyist, it frustrates me at times because sometimes it's not as nimble as it needs to be, in my opinion. However, it is a tried and true process to develop good policy that Kansas farmers and ranchers support. Are there people that disagree? Absolutely. I don't think you have anybody in your caucus that is in total agreement. in your caucuses, respective caucuses. However, once again, we are the voice of agriculture, and on behalf of the 30,000 voting members of Kansas Farm Bureau, we stand adamantly opposed to this resolution. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. John, since you brought it up, the process, I've got text. In fact, I was contacted throughout the summer that individuals, in fact, one gentleman from Douglas or from Ford County, he was shut down. He couldn't even speak on the topic. So he feels like the process did not work. I'm just stating that you said that the process worked. I think there was an adamant effort to shut down the voices of individuals. And I know there was a senator that was shut down too. So,
I appreciate that. I will actually, I wasn't going to bring up that a senator came to our policy development meeting. And I will tell you, I was not there, but I was told that the local members told him that, they did not feel it was appropriate for an elected official to come to develop or to change our policy, and that let's let the members do that. And I'm not saying he wasn't a member. He had every right to do it, but I know that was the pushback. That was the situation that I'm aware of.
So we lose our voice if we're a legislator with Farm Bureau as a member. But I won't get into that. I'm a huge Farm Bureau fan. My first IT job was Farm Bureau, not Farm Bureau in Kansas. Helped you get the health thing across the line because that was my experience with Tennessee Farm Bureau. Committee, any other questions? Senator Owens.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for being here, John. So do you have any idea how ag land is taxed differently in Oklahoma than Kansas? Because that's the only thing that I can ascertain as to why your sister organization in Oklahoma strongly supports this legislation. And having researched this, as this has kind of been brought up, it is quite clear that this policy has helped control the increase of property taxes in Oklahoma. So do you know any of those differences and why we would have a different stance than Oklahoma?
First, I want to apologize because I cannot knock this cough. So all future conferees, I apologize. I'm not contagious. I have been to the doctor. But anyways, yeah, I just cannot get rid of it. So that's a great question. And I believe we addressed this a little bit last year on the Oklahoma position. I will say this. Number one, I think this is modeled after Oklahoma, but Oklahoma's taxing system is totally different. To say I've studied the differences, I will not say I've done that. I will say this, that every state farm bureau develops their own policy, and they make the decisions on how they're going to lobby bills. So the only thing I'd push back on a little bit to say that Oklahoma Farm Bureau is, our sister organization, is supportive of this effort. They don't care about this effort. In fact, they've been approached by people, but they have not engaged, as that I'm aware of. So,
and my apologies if I made the inclination
right,
that they were supportive of what we're doing in Kansas. No, but they're supportive of what was done in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And Oklahoma, what we're proposing here is very similar to that. So I was just curious if there were any differences.
And there's always differences in tax structure and funding of governments, as we all know. And like I said, I've heard some things, but to say it in a public hearing, I probably would misspeak, and I don't want to do that. So I apologize.
Thanks, John.
And we can talk offline if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions, committee? Seeing none. I do have one. I did talk to the Oklahoma Farm Bureau president, and I don't want to pit Farm Bureau against Farm Bureau because, like I said, it's a great organization. We absolutely do not. We need the voice of agriculture, but they did support it. And I asked them what problems it's caused, and there's none. They actually supported the decreasing it to 3% in 2012. So I get it. There's different policy, but you did say the reason it's constitutional because it would be unfair. Actually, we've got very innovative people. We could introduce this without a constitutional amendment, but this is a cleaner way to go.
That's fair.
So, yeah.
And if I may, I actually said it's not uniform and equal. I didn't say it's unfair. So that's
Well,
unless I misspoke,
explain the
which I try not to do.
No, that's okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, John.
Yeah, appreciate that, Madam Chair.
Next conferee is Leah Filter. Welcome to the Tax Committee.
Morning, Madam Chair. Thank you. I'm Leah Fleiter, the Assistant Executive Director for Advocacy for the Kansas State School Boards. That's okay, Madam Chair. Happens all the time. No, I don't own the leaf filter. I don't own that. That's not my side gig. But I get that a lot. I wanted to appear today. You've got your testimony in front of you. I am also a former school board member in Manhattan, Ogden, and I worked for 10 years in the public policy arena with Kansas Farm Bureau. That was a burden that Mr. Donnelly had to bear, and I know he regrets it to this day. But I want to bring that all in because that gives you some context that, we have a unique understanding in delivering this testimony about the burdens of the property tax and how unpopular property taxes are. Many of our school board members in Kansas are also farmers or ranchers. So we do have that context. So our legislative policy asks that we not have arbitrary caps on valuations because that would reduce the potential revenue for public services, including public schools. So that's why we're here today to oppose this bill. We do know that property tax is a priority for the legislature and that our members do understand that. And I guess I appreciate that opportunity, and I'll stand for questions whenever you like.
Thank you, Leah. And I should have had an overview with the revisor. I felt like since it was fresh enough, this does not impact the appraisal or the valuation. It only is the taxable assessment.
Yes, I'm sorry I
So
misspoke.
I just want to make sure that
It-
you
it
guys understand that.
Caps your valuation increase.
No, it does not.
Oh, okay.
It is an assessment limit.
Assessment, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Are there
Thank
any
you. I
questions? Senator?
appreciate that. This is my first day testifying this session, so I appreciate you making sure that I didn't make a mistake right off the bat.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you. So when I was, and yesterday I made a comment about the limit, the assessment limit. If it doesn't affect a local's ability to raise a mill to run their business, how is this affecting schools in a way that, other than transparency and having them run their budget the way they need to run their budget, if they can do what they want in that moment in time, how does a assessment limit affect their ability to do that?
Well, school boards, school districts are especially sensitive to those assessed valuation changes. Many of our districts have a lot of, do have ag land. We also have a lot of residential. And so that, when that assessed valuation goes up, that does increase our ability to provide the services that kids need. So we have always dealt with that. We've always been very transparent in our budget meetings every year, even before the revenue neutral law. We always held budget hearings in the public and allowed public comment. So it is very transparent. School boards meet usually throughout the spring and summer and fall to have public discussion of their budgets. And so now we have actually 2 budget hearings to be extra transparent. We have the traditional budget hearing, and then often that same evening we have the revenue neutral hearing as well. And so our local boards are very sensitive to the fact that when the assessed valuation goes up, it can make it look like, oh, we're not really raising your taxes. We're just, the assessed valuation is, help. And it does help. But, as I mentioned at the outset, school board members are very sensitive to that. School board members are property taxpayers as well. Senator Starnes, as a former superintendent, knows how they grapple with that. And so it's just a very kind of complicated process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I would just say that we crafted this in such a way to make sure local could manage their budgets and run their business the way they need to run their business. So I do think that that'll be an interesting argument that you're bringing, because when this legislature tried to stay away from that and tried to say, hey, it's your business, local control, run it how you choose, how you see fit to run it. So I think there'll be probably agree to disagree on that, but I appreciate you coming today.
Thank you, and we'll look forward to the conversation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Next up is Sean Miller, Kansas Building Industry Association. Welcome.
Leah and I back-to-back is a test of the microphone. Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, my name is Sean Miller. I represent the Kansas Building Industry Association. We are the residential home builders and remodelers and associated suppliers within the state of Kansas, roughly 2,000 members across the state of Kansas. I believe you should have my testimony, should have this logo on the top and a lot less hand scratch that I was kind of scribbling down notes as I listened to some questions yesterday and today. I will not read my testimony, but I will run quickly through it if I can. So first off, Kansas Building Industry Association is opposed to SCR 1616 as written. That does not, and I want to be very clear, mean that we are opposed to reducing taxes or reducing the reliance on taxes or changing some of the variables within the taxing structure. In fact, we appreciate this committee for bringing this because we think it's a necessary and a good conversation for all of us to have. But a couple of quick points, and I thought maybe it was really highlighted by the senator's questions for the previous conferee. Nothing in SCR 1616 actually reduces your property taxes. It provides an artificial cap on valuation for assessed value for tax purposes of your real property. And so I do believe there's some confusion there. I saw a lot of the testimony yesterday from proponents that said, please pass this so that my taxes go down. As you mentioned, assessed valuation for tax purposes is simply one of many variables. A local taxing entity, of which I think there are approximately 4,000 currently in the state of Kansas, sets their budget, they look at their assessed valuation, and then the county clerk puts those two numbers together and they come up with a mill levy number. So without a corresponding budget cap or a corresponding mill levy cap, this just shifts pieces of the formula around and creates, in theory, at least a confusing, if not artificial cap on real property valuations. So I did want to talk about that a little bit. I also want to quickly talk just a little bit about the housing market in Kansas. I completely 100% agree that as you go door to door and you visit with your constituents, property tax is probably one of the top things that comes up. I think that's probably incredibly so if you have paid off your house. Because my life stages I went through, I paid off my house a couple of years ago. Before that, all this magically happened in some crazy thing called escrow, and I didn't see it. And now I get a really big bill 2 weeks before Christmas every year when I'm trying to find money to buy presents and do other things. I think the way that we collect property tax creates a lot of heartburn and incentive. But creating this cap that compounds over time as we talk over 10, 20, 30 years within your house, I worry a little bit may affect the churn that impacts the housing market in Kansas. Typical lifestyle, probably start out in an apartment in college, or maybe you're renting a place, you get married, you buy your first house, it's a starter house, you begin to have kids, you move into a little bit bigger house, maybe eventually you get your dream home, and then hopefully you sort of move into a empty nester, downsized type property. And that churn is necessary for the generation behind you to have additional houses to move into as their families grow and contract. This, I'm afraid, and we've seen it in other states, provides an incentive for that empty nester that maybe has a 4-bedroom house and now it's just mom and dad to keep that house, because if they buy a new condo or they buy something else, they are moving into a higher construction that has a higher tax rate potentially than that 15, 20, 30 years of capped valuation that they may have accrued. Now, as I read 1616, that capped valuation would pass on to the next purchaser. But as we've seen with interest rates, many people today have an interest rate locked in at maybe 2.8, 3%, and now rates are closer to 6.5 or 7. That keeps them from entering the market and buying a new house. So they stayed locked in a house that's maybe not the right fit for them or their family. I think that this could potentially have some of the same issue on this. I also want to talk a little bit, and I know this could be addressed in a future bill, but one of the things that triggers evaluation of the home, sort of loses the cap, if you will, is improvements on the real property. Now, if you were taking a piece of raw property and you're building a house on it, that makes perfect sense. If you're remodeling a kitchen, is that an improvement? Do we do a 15,000 remodel on a kitchen and we trigger all sorts of stuff? What about normal and necessary maintenance that could be expensive, like new siding, like roofing, those kinds of things? I realize that could be addressed and defined in future legislation, but we are potentially putting something in the Constitution before we know what that next definition looks like, and that could have a really big impact on the residential and even commercial remodeling business here in Kansas. One final thing, Madam Chair, I know I've gone on a little bit long here, is how we finance some of our developments. We're having to get pretty creative. New home developments are very expensive. We use TIFs or TIF-like procedures in places, whether it's RHID or the Moderate Income Housing Program. Those are paid off by the incremental tax increases from those particular developments. And if we have capped the assessed valuation within those developments, we may take a project that would have paid off over 15 years and extended it to 20 or 30, and now we cannot open up a new development. And as much as people do not like their property taxes, I also don't think there's anybody at the doors that's going to say, well, we have way too many houses, there's too many options. Like, we are in a very tight housing market right now. So I just want to be careful about the things that might exacerbate that. So I really appreciate it. We remain committed to working on all this. But we are opposed to SCR 1616 as currently written. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, any questions? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Sean, thank you for being here. I was given some information about the age, the percentage of householders and their age, and it actually shows that Kansas has a higher percentage of household owners under 35 and particularly under 45. So I think that goes along with this idea that we want to have people moving into the market. But I think the other question I had, clearly when we're knocking on doors, it's people with their residential property and getting those notices that are unhappy. Has that changed over the years in terms of percentage of the property tax base that residential property is having to bear?
So thank you, Madam Chair. Senator, I want to clarify your question. Are we talking about the percentage of the total property base that's attributable to residential versus ag or commercial? So it's a bit cyclical. If we go back in the 80s and 90s, we look at it, it's a little different. Over the last 25 years, we have seen roughly a 20% increase in the total amount of property taxes that is attributable to residential. It was, you look at the numbers, 35 to 37%. Now it's closer to 55%. Some of that is due to local exemptions for commercial facilities. Some of that is due to the rising valuations of houses. But it is generally increased over the last 25 years by a relatively significant percent.
So if I may, it's not cyclical. It is actually shrinking, the number of agriculture. If you look at the numbers, there's a distinct pattern for the last 20 years. It's not cyclical.
I would agree with that, certainly for the last 20 years. Cyclical was perhaps the wrong word. If you looked at it in the 80s, 90s, it would present a different picture than it does today.
Yes, that is accurate.
Yes.
So, any other questions, follow up? Okay, Senator Schallenberger.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for being here. And I actually agree with about everything you said. So, I mean, that's pretty good for me.
And thank you. Oh.
And Senator Francisco's question, I think in the rural parts of the state, we've seen a consolidation of ag, where everybody owned 40 acres, and now I got a farmer farming 12,000 acres. He doesn't own it, but he farms it. So were the statistics, the 55% you were mentioning, was that the number of taxpayers or the number of parcels?
So I'll have to go and confirm. I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Senator, I believe that is not the number of parcels. I believe that is the revenue. So I'll have to go look to confirm, so I apologize.
What you were saying is the revenue in total that is attributable to residential has gone up. Okay.
I believe that to be
I have
accurate.
those
Part of the
numbers.
problem.
I have those numbers if the committee
Okay.
is interested in them.
I'd like to see
And
them.
in fact, we distributed some of them, but last year, but we'll go ahead and get that information to you again.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. One of the transferability is a big issue. It's, one of the things is, well, we're not going to debate the bill. I wanted to hear from you and any other questions for the conferee. Okay, I would just ask that you research the transferability. It's one of the best in the nation.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next up is Matt Teagarden, Kansas Livestock Association. Welcome to the Tax Committee.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I am Matt Teagarden. I'm with the Kansas Livestock Association. I am a poor substitute for Aaron Popelka, who is very under the weather. And so I'm going to provide some comments. You have the testimony. It's under his name. And so I'm just going to highlight a few key pieces from that testimony that we submitted. I want to first state very clearly that KLA opposes SCR 1616. It does not reduce the overall property tax liability at the local level. Instead, it will shift the burden among different classes and subclasses of property. My colleague Sean Miller talked about how property taxes are calculated. I had that point, and I'll just emphasize that the resolution, the constitutional amendment proposal does not cap taxes. It caps the assessed value. And so as that's capped, that does not affect our overall property tax liability. I heard yesterday in testimony that the concern about appraisals and that appraisals aren't representative of the actual market. And so that may very well be an issue. The Department of Revenue, and we noted this in our testimony, indicates that actual appraisals are within the confidence interval that they're supposed to be. That doesn't mean that every appraisal is accurate. And so if that's an issue, let's address that. Let's make appraisers accountable. Let's make it easier for citizens to appeal that appraisal and work through that process to get an accurate appraisal on their property. I want to highlight that we worked with the Property Valuation Division to assemble data that included the assessed value of each subclass of real property by county, along with the average mill levy for each county. PVD then adjusted the data set, applying a 3% cap to the assessed value of each subclass, and adjusted the mill levy to provide the local governments with the same budget authority. Each county is unique. The results aren't the same in every county, but a pattern emerged in most counties. With the cap in place over the last 5 years, that's the data that we reviewed, residential property owners would have paid less taxes, while owners of agricultural land, agricultural improvements, commercial property, oil and gas, and vehicles generally paid more in property taxes. We attach results to our testimony from Shawnee County. We can provide that run for every county in the state. We have that data from PVD. Also want to address an issue that seems to be a question about whether rank and file KLA members oppose SCR 1616 and similar proposals. I want to outline the input that we sought and received from KLA members over the past couple of years. We start with our standing policy. That's the policy that our members approve each year that directs our staff and our volunteer leaders in the work that we do. In this case, the policy that applies here has been on the books for at least 20 years and has been consistent. It says we oppose increased reliance on property taxes from agricultural land. We also took this issue straight to our members. This topic was on the agenda for our fall member roundtables in 2024. At the 2024 KLA convention, it was on the agenda during several of our committee meetings and council meetings. At our legislative meeting last February of 2025, we discussed this issue extensively with our members. Last fall, at our fall 2025 member roundtables, this was a topic of discussion, and that at our 2025 KLA convention held in November, this topic was on the agenda with our board of directors, our county chairman, our tax committee, and our cattle feeders council. KLA opposes SCR 1616 because our members continue to tell us to oppose a valuation cap. Finally, while KLA opposes SCR 1616, we do stand ready. We support property tax relief, and we stand ready to identify solutions that actually provide that property tax relief. Thank you, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Matt. Committee questions, Senator Schallenberger. I know, I've got a few too. We may have to bring some people back tomorrow.
A lot of questions. I'm sorry, and if you want me to wait, I can. So to summarize, as long as the homeowner is getting gouged, you don't mind, as long as you're not getting gouged.
Madam Chair, Senator, we support broad-based property tax relief for all property owners.
As long as you get some of it.
Broad-based property tax relief.
So homes are the only property in Kansas, first of all, that a person resides in. So every Kansan lives in a house. Not every Kansas owns agricultural land. And the home is the only thing in Kansas that is assessed at market value. As you know, ag land is not assessed at market value. It's assessed way lower. And you think that's fair? You don't want to see the homeowner assessed at a different rate, but you are happy to be assessed at a different rate.
Madam Chair, Senator, the use value appraisal system has been in place for a number of years, and I think
I know.
has proven that it works because it separates that market influence that can affect ag land differently depending on what part of the state you're in and a number of factors, and ties it to the income producing ability of that land. And that, I think as we look at the ability to pay taxes, the property tax comes whether we make any money or not in agriculture, and so tying that value to that income producing ability makes sense to us.
I understand that, and I want everybody to know I'm not opposed to that. I'm just saying the homeowner doesn't get that option. Grandma, who doesn't have any income, she can't say, well, I can only afford so much. She has to pay it or lose her house. And I would like to know, and maybe you have this, how much land in Kansas is not owned by Kansans? In Cherokee County, the farmer I mentioned that farms 12,000 acres, 6,000 of those are owned by people in Missouri. And they're cattle people, and they move their cattle to Kansas because Missouri has a livestock tax. So they're just avoiding taxes. They live in Missouri because it's cheaper to live there, and they put their cattle in Kansas because we don't have a livestock tax.
Senator, Missouri doesn't, I checked last night. I wanted to make sure. Oklahoma and Missouri no longer have a livestock tax either.
They had one up until.
Yeah, it's recently, yeah. I just
They
wanted to
still have
let you know,
inventory tax.
they're still moving the cattle, but they may
Yeah,
think
they
that
are.
that tax is there, but it's not. So we won't tell them either. So we need the work here.
Anyway, it just, I don't know what we do for the homeowners. It's just really hard to fix their problem.
So any other questions? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I took note when you were listing, the idea this is a balloon, and if taxes go away from one place, they're going to end up in another. But you mentioned vehicle taxes, and I know that that's another tax that many of my constituents at one time were very concerned about. We got a grip on it, and I would hate to see that come back. And I guess I wasn't thinking of that very much in terms of how this might affect vehicles. And you might not be able to answer that, or I could get some help from our revisor. Till later, Madam Chair.
Do you want to, or I can turn that over to research? They are not included in the 3% limit. That was intentional. If you look at other states that have this, they do not have vehicles or oil and gas, or Kansas is one of the most aggressive taxes on vehicles. So that is something too. We'll get information from research when we work the bill. So Matt, I do have a couple of questions, unless you had follow-up. Okay. So I'm going to give you a quick scenario, and I know we're running short on time. So Cloud County, I've got all these numbers too. I've got them going back further than you guys do and longer years than you do. Because if you look at a snapshot, yes, in this area, ag would pick up a little bigger portion. Never disputed that. But what's interesting to me, like Cloud County in the last 3 years, they've had a 14% decrease in agriculture land. Their residential has gone through the roof, 48% increase in what they're paying. So you take an 80-acre row crop in Cloud County, 14%. And if we would implement this limit, this value asset limit, not valuation limit, not ag value limit, it would be a 10% decrease still, not a 14% decrease. And you're arguing against that?
Madam Chair, thanks for the question. I think our point is that this largely will shift the property tax burden, assuming that local units of government have determined the dollars that they need to spend to buy gravel for county roads, to pay for EMS and fire and all the services that counties provide. I use a county example, that they determine their budget based on dollars, not value, not the mill levy in isolation, dollars.
This is the exact dollar amount collected, and it decreased them
And to get to those dollars, that's not going to change, not likely to change. At least capping assessed value doesn't require the local units to cap their spending. And so if that's the case, if we assume that, and that's an assumption, I think we have to make a lot of assumptions as we try to analyze this. That's an assumption, but our concern is we shift that burden among different property classes, and it's not a straightforward way to actually lower property tax liability.
And it is a shift. I just gave the perfect example, 14% decrease versus a 10% decrease. So only in government is an increase to the decrease a cut. But I appreciate you. And the information, we'll make sure the committee gets more. Any other questions, committee? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Our last opponent conferee is Mark Toom.
All right. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to testify in opposition to Senate Concurrent Resolution 1616. My name is Mark Toom. I'm with Kansas Realtors, and on behalf of the 10,000 realtors involved in residential, agriculture, and commercial real estate, this legislation in its previous forms, and including this, has gone through our policy development process as well. You certainly will probably be engaged by some of our members who have disagreed with our position on this. We have over 10,000 members. I can't expect every one of them to agree on all of our issues, but we have a wide open policy process where everyone is invited to that. And this has been on our radar for about 3 years. And we oppose it for several reasons. Primarily, we do firmly believe that property taxes are a problem. I think that there are also issues with the assessment process, but we view this, we see this as property taxes as a formula, and I think it's been mentioned. You have government spending times the value of properties, and that equals your property tax obligation. And if you're only dealing with the valuation side of things, and local governments are still able to tax freely with really only limited by what the ballot box consequences might be, this is not going to lower taxes. And really, it was kind of interesting with the proponents yesterday. Almost all of them mentioned that this was going to reduce property taxes. And with that formula, we just don't see that being the case. I don't want to repeat too many of the other points because we do agree with the issues dealing with the definitions of improvements. And I know that can be a moving target, and it could probably be addressed if the threshold was high enough that it wouldn't trigger that full assessed valuation. And then also what this does to new home construction and the disadvantage that are placed on those types of properties. And for those reasons, we do oppose this legislation and be happy to answer questions at the appropriate time.
Questions? Seeing none, I keep hearing that it doesn't help property owners. How can a reset of a baseline of 2022 assessment rates not help taxpayers?
I think that if you have that reset that occurs, then you'll put the pressure on local governments. Local governments are not operating in a vacuum. They still have health care and all the infrastructure costs that they're dealing with. They're going to raise their budgets to meet that demand that the public has. There needs to be clearly more tools placed on local governments and constraints. I think that having more voter-driven levies for authority and for purposes, I think that's similar to what is in Oklahoma, and I think that there are differences when we talk about other states, and we can get into that as well. But I think that, yeah, I'll leave it at that. And
well, I understand local governments still have control for the mill levies, but Senator Schellenberger, go ahead.
I'm just interested in what you had to say, but and now I think I forgot what I was going to say.
I was just going to say that there's constant mill levies, and it would help in those scenarios. So to say it would not help taxpayers is interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, homeowners are you talk about at the ballot box. That's what we are.
Absolutely.
And the people who aren't here are grandma. Now you're getting paid because people sell real estate, and so you may lose a commission. And, you know, the livestock and the Farm Bureau, they see a shift to ag land. I understand all of that. But who's here? We're here for the people. And the homeowners we go and see, when we knock on doors, can you do something about the property tax? The state doesn't even collect it. We won't after next year. How do you fix this? We could change the assessment rate. We could take the 11.5 or 12, whatever it is now, down to 8. Mike Hayden did that. They ran him out of town on a rail. And Nestor Wygant almost became governor over it. And that would work, but then I'm sure the same people would be against that, except for you, maybe. Do you have a solution to this stuff? I mean, cities and counties have to raise money.
I think you did a good thing last year as far as solutions, eliminating that 1.5 mil. That's, you know, part of the state controlled. I think there's further things you can do with the 20 mil that still is influenced, you know, by your decision making. You could make that revenue neutral. You could start trimming that. Those are the state essentially controlled elements. I think there are certainly some things for local government. I think that, you know, having you know, a vote of the people over certain sort of inflationary you know, growth in a budget, because I think there's far too much reliance on property taxes, and property taxes are high, and my members see that. It's the total cost of home ownership, and I think that there needs to be relief. We just don't see this particular constitutional amendment as providing that relief.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
I don't have any other opponents listed. Is there any other that would like to testify in opposition? Seeing none, we do have written testimony for opposition. I'll bring your attention to that. Committee, I'm going to return. Linnell Griffith came in for the second day. Linnell, and she is a proponent for the legislation. Thank you, Linnell.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify. My name is Linnell Griffith. I live in Topeka. And just also letting you know, I'm the chair for the Shawnee County Republican Party. And I say that in context because back in September, before a revenue neutral rate hearing for the city of Topeka, I met with the chair of the Shawnee County Democrats, the 2nd District Libertarian chair, and a council member who is a registered independent, all for the express purpose of saying we have to get property taxes under control. Please don't increase beyond the RNR. And you've heard the stories, you probably have them of your own about how people are really being harmed by their property taxes. And I want to talk solutions today instead of going into the reasons why we need to get property taxes under control, because I think so many people, even in this room standing in opposition, agree that we need some sort of property tax relief. So I'm going to give an analogy of property taxes being a road, and they have become a dangerous road. Now, about 5 years after Kansas became a state, the state legislature allowed for the locals to impose property taxes. Well, since I've been involved, we put up a road sign for that dangerous road of property taxes, and that road sign is the revenue neutral rate hearings, which really increased awareness. And it let us know, hey, your property taxes might go up, come to this meeting, let them know what you think. And I go to those meetings, and we pack the room, and they raise our property taxes nevertheless. And of course, there's some abuse in spending as well. So we need that road sign, but we need 2 guardrails. And one guardrail that we need on this dangerous road is this assessment cap. I've been a proponent of this for years. It helps the homeowner, as that's the bigger part of your equation. As you know, your property tax bill equation has 2 variables. You have your assessed value and you have your mill levy. We also need a guardrail for the total revenue collected from the various taxing authorities. We need both guardrails to make this work. And a lot of people in opposition to the assessment cap do want to see a revenue cap. And I propose with said revenue cap, if local taxing authorities want to go beyond, say, 3% or the consumer price index or inflation or however you decide to paint the picture, then that increase in the revenue has to go to a vote by the people, expressly saying what the increase is for, so the people can decide. That's one guardrail that we need for the variable in the equation. And again, the other one is assessment cap to certainly help the homeowners and the business owners. With both guardrails in place, I think we can pretty much satisfy everybody in this room. But here's an issue. I was thinking, what about population increasing and decreasing? How do we adjust for that? Well, with both guardrails, it works with population increases and decreases. If we have the assessment cap, then we're protecting the people who already live here. We're spending a lot of money in various communities, bringing people into our communities, and a lot of times taxing people out of their homes. So with the assessment cap, we help the people living here at this time. With the revenue cap, we help everybody, but we also help new construction. We also help agriculture. So we need both guardrails in place in order to get property tax under control. And again, it was the state that allowed for this road, and the citizens of all political affiliations are saying we need help with this. And so I'm saying we need both guardrails. But if you just do a revenue cap, which has to be approved by the vote of the people, expressly for what, and you don't have an assessment cap, then you're, say the population you're hurting people that live there, but say the population decreases. Now, your population, if it decreases by 4,000 people, then they may still have to pay this huge tax sum in revenue, and there are fewer people paying it. But if you have an assessment cap, then the only part of the equation your local taxing authorities can tinker with is the mill. And that becomes more apparent, so we increase transparency. Now, if more people move into your community, then that revenue cap that has to be approved by a vote of the public adjusts for more people coming in. Because say you have 5,000 people move into your community, you need a new road. Well, people can vote for that and expressly help. So we need to keep the road sign. We need both guardrails. And ask yourself, has yours or has most people, have their income gone up at the rate of their property tax bill? Probably not, unless you've had just a tremendous increase in your income. Most people, their income is not in step with the increase of their property taxes. So we need to honor those people who want to stay in their communities, and at the same time, we need to get a cap on the total revenue collected and take it to a public vote if we want to exceed that. And so I thank you for your good, hard work. May God bless you in your decisions, and I really appreciate the opportunity to testify, and I'd be delighted to take questions.
Seeing none, thank you, Linnell.
Thank you.
Appreciate your testimony. We have another Erica Sheets. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee members. My name is Erica Sheets, and as you can see, I am a chapter chair of Moms for Liberty Johnson County. But this morning, in front of this committee, I am providing testimony as an individual and a 15-year Kansas resident. So I'm here in support of SCR 1616. My husband and our children and I have been residents in the same Leawood home since 2010. And we knew Leawood was an excellent investment and certainly expected our home value to increase. But then there have been years our county assessment has jumped 10% or more in a single year when we didn't make any improvements And they supposedly justified that with comps that had more bedrooms than our house has, more bathrooms, more square footage, and updates that our home didn't have. And while we do have a process to challenge that, and I did, and I won, and then the next time we get our letter, they go right back to the same place they were before. So in our house with two special needs children, they have more financial needs than their neurotypical peers. And these increases, especially so much in such a short time, has put a significant burden on our family in multiple occasions. The Kansas taxpayer is not an endless piggy bank. Certainly not anyone in this room. But much too often, government behavior at all levels has demonstrated a loss of respect for the people's money. For example, last year, the Johnson County Board of Commissioners sued the Attorney General to proceed with resolutions that would have unlawfully taxed citizens tens of millions of dollars under the guise of public safety. Despite losing that challenge, the commission, in its hubris, is still attempting to exceed their authority by modifying those resolutions' language in an end-run effort at grabbing more from the people of Johnson County. The public education establishment stands opposed to this bill, as you heard earlier, because they view it as reducing their money. Kansas taxpayers currently invest about $19,000 per student per year for public education, which is one of the highest amounts in the nation, even before adjusting for the cost of living difference. Yet, according to the KSDE performance report data, over 68% of Kansas students are below the effective level for math. Over 66% are below the effective level for ELA. Higher education confirms that K through 12 is not doing its job en masse, because 40 to 60% of incoming freshmen require remedial reading and math, and that's of those accepted into college. Student mental health distress.
I have to rein you in on the bill.
Okay.
We are out of time. So do you have a final statement?
Yes, I would say that with the passage of this resolution, local governments still have the ability to make assessments within a range and consider actions surrounding tax rates and other levers they have at their disposal. And that while this bill does not comprehensively reduce the taxpayer burdens, it is guardrails that do provide some meaningful relief and help support respect for the people's money. So I urge the committee to pass the resolution, and I'm available for questions.
Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Erica, for coming and testifying.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, I'd like to thank all the conferees today. I'm not going to close the hearing. We're going to continue the hearing on SCR 1616 to tomorrow morning. We'll adjust the schedule accordingly. We'll finish up. I know we have a couple of more proponents and a neutral testimony. Eric, can you be here tomorrow? Okay, great. I figured the ones that work in the building, yeah. Thank you for your flexibility, though. Appreciate it. Any other business to be brought before the committee? We're adjourned. Thank you.